The Federation's battle fleet was on the brink of engaging in the ultimate battle against the galaxy's most formidable foe, the Krylon Empire. The Krylons represented the greatest threat to humanity's existence. For years, humanity and its allies had managed to resist the Krylons' aggressive expansion, but this time was different. The Krylons had reached the heart of the Federation, obliterating critical planets and leaving devastation in their wake. Tevian, the Federation's highest-ranking commander, was studying the battle plans on the expansive holomap in the strategy room. Every move, every tactical decision would determine the fate of billions. The weight of the operation's impending start felt as if it could last forever, even though only minutes remained. His second-in-command, Marek, turned to Tevian as he scanned the holomap. "Commander, all units have assumed battle positions. Everyone is waiting for your orders," Marek said. Tevian looked at Marek and nodded with resolute determination. He felt the weight of the war not just on his shoulders, but in his heart, as he carried the responsibility of defending humanity and all the galactic species who believed in freedom. This battle would be a turning point, not only for humanity but for all who fought for liberty across the stars. "This might be our last chance," Tevian thought to himself as he took a deep breath and began speaking. "Inform all units to complete their preparations. The battle is about to begin," he said. Marek quickly relayed the orders. Tevian then took a deep breath and walked towards the bridge. The cold metal corridors of the ship only intensified the tense atmosphere. Tevian knew that as a leader, he had to show courage to his troops. When he reached the bridge, the crew stood at attention as Tevian entered. The large screen in the center of the room displayed the Krylon fleet and their massive ships. The Krylons looked as intimidating as ever. The metallic sheen of their vessels made them appear as deadly predators. Without taking his eyes off the screen, Tevian began to speak. "This battle is not just about a victory or defeat. It will be the most crucial fight we face to ensure humanity's survival in the galaxy. Today, we may not make it out of here alive. But you must know that we are the last bastion of the galaxy, the last spark of humanity's light in the dark. Each of your courage and sacrifice will determine our fate," he said, looking around at his entire crew. "You are fighting for humanity. This moment will not be inscribed in history books, but in the stars themselves." Marek approached Tevian and spoke quietly. "Commander, the Krylons are starting to move. An attack is imminent." Tevian maintained his composure and gave his orders. "All units, assume attack positions. Shields at full power. Send out the fighter ships to engage and disrupt them." The fleet's ships quickly moved to carry out Tevian's orders. Massive warships surrounded the agile fighter craft, creating a defensive line against the Krylon fleet. As the Krylons launched their assault, space erupted into brilliance. Energy weapons created star-bright explosions as they struck the ships. The first wave of attacks was severe. The human ships were rocked by the Krylons' intense fire. However, Tevian, a master strategist, had anticipated the enemy's movements and had prepared the defense accordingly. "The left flank is weakening," Marek said, focusing on the lower right corner of the screen. "The fighter ships can't withstand the assault." Tevian responded immediately. All fighter fleets advanced towards the Krylon center. While continuing the assault, used dispersion tactics. "If the Krylons focus on the central flagship, we'll target their weak points." Marek nodded and quickly relayed the orders. The fighter ships bravely engaged the Krylons, distracting them while the main ships launched counterattacks with explosive missiles. Space was filled with explosions. The sounds of clashing metal and vibrations from the ships brought death close to each participant. After a while, most of the Krylon's forward warships had either exploded or retreated. Tevian decided to seize the opportunity. Marek, Keep track of the enemy ship's movements, Tevian said. We need to locate the flagship. We can't win this war without taking down the Krylon command ship. Merrick quickly examined the map, scanning sensors. Commander, the flagship is very close to the center. However, it is heavily protected. A direct attack would be suicidal right now, he said. Tevian furrowed his brow. It was a gamble, but they had no other choice. All fleets advanced towards the center. We must break through the defense line to reach the flagship, he said. This could be our final move, but if we play it right, we can exploit the Krylon's vulnerability. As the ships regrouped and began their assault on the Krylon fleet, the outcome of the battle hinged on this final push. Humanity's last hope rested on this decisive attack. As the Federation fleet advanced towards the heart of the Krylon Empire's power, the devastating impact of the battle was felt more with each passing second. The dark void of space was lit up by the flashes of energy weapons and massive explosions, turning this corner of the galaxy into a hellish landscape. The Krylons, wielding their years of battle experience and technological superiority, were using all their might to push humanity back. But under Tevian's command, the humans were not willing to back down. The fate of the galaxy depended on this battle. Tevian stood on the bridge of the command ship, hands clasped behind his back, watching the holomap while feeling every tremor of the ship. His sole objective was to locate and destroy the Krylon flagship. He knew that without achieving this objective, victory in the war was impossible. The Krylons would never retreat without their flagship being destroyed. Merrick, glancing at the alert signals from the terminal next to him, wiped the sweat from his brow. Commander, our ships in the central region are under heavy fire. The Krylons are trying to trap them. Our capital ships can't withstand this pressure, he reported. Tevian took a deep breath. With such intense attacks, he had to adjust his strategy, but even the slightest mistake could spell the end for the Federation. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, rapidly evaluating the possibilities in his mind. We won't divide our ships. If we advance them all together, the Krylons will encircle us, Tevian said, then turned to Merrick with his orders. Withdraw all fighter squadrons to the rear of the central line. They need to support our capital ships. We need to distract the Krylons. Merrick nodded and immediately relayed the orders. The human fighters maneuvered quickly, withdrawing from the central line but taking a dangerous dive towards the Krylon main fleets. This maneuver would momentarily distract the Krylons and give the Federation's capital ships a breather. The rapidly spinning fighters in space bravely fought off Krylon fire. Commander, we've located the Krylon flagship, Merrick shouted, his eyes momentarily gleaming with excitement. It's on the right flank, protected by 4 Krylon warships. Tevian sprang into action. Excellent. Tell all ships to focus on the flagship. We'll break through the protection line and launch our attack. The fighter squadrons will clear the way, Tevian instructed. This may be our last chance, but if we destroy the flagship, we can win this war. The orders were swiftly communicated to the fleet. Tevian's plan was risky, but there were no other options. Human ships continued to advance under heavy Krylon fire. Exploding ships and lost lives illustrated how brutal this war was. Yet nothing could stop Tevian and his team. As the main assault began, the Krylon flagship loomed large and menacing. The massive, dark, and intimidating ship gleamed like a star. The 4 surrounding protective ships tightened their defense line, launching a relentless assault against the human fleet. The Krylons were doing everything they could to protect the flagship, knowing that if it was destroyed, the war would end. Tevian maintained his composure and turned to Merrick. Concentrate all firepower on the flagship. Merrick immediately directed all of the ship's firepower towards the flagship. Space was filled with explosions as Krylon protective ships continued to fight off the human onslaught. But Tevian's strategy was working. The Krylons were depleting all their resources trying to defend the flagship. As the battle intensified, Federation ships began to weaken the Krylon defenses. One of the protective ships exploded, vanishing into the depths of space. This was a sign of victory for humanity. The flagship was now more exposed and vulnerable. "Commander, we've taken down another protective ship," Marek said, with a hint of hope in his voice. Tevian spoke without taking his eyes off the flagship. "Take down the others as well. When their defenses are weakened, we'll deliver the final blow to the flagship." As the Federation ships continued to breach the Krylon defense line, each explosion and maneuver tipped the balance of the war increasingly in humanity's favor. The Krylons were forced to retreat to their own boundaries, but the flagship was still fighting with all its might. Suddenly, a blast filled the bridge. Tevian felt the bridge shake. Marek quickly turned to his terminal to address the situation. "Our shields have sustained serious damage. The flagship is in danger." Tevian furrowed his brow. With the enemy flagship so close, retreating was unacceptable. He took a deep breath and made his decision. "We're not retreating. Reinforce the shields and direct all our firepower at the flagship," he said firmly. The tension on the bridge mounted as orders were issued. Despite the damage, the Federation ship prepared to deliver the final blow to the flagship. Energy projectiles streaked through space towards the Krylon flagship. A final explosion engulfed the space. The Krylon flagship's defense systems had collapsed, and the massive ship was engulfed in flames. Tevian felt victory was close, but the war was not yet over. Marek turned to Tevian with a look of relief mixed with joy. "Commander, the flagship has taken severe damage, but it's still active." Tevian paused for a moment. They had to destroy the flagship. Otherwise, the Krylons would regroup and counterattack. "We need to deliver one last blow," Tevian said, his voice calm but resolute. "Tell all ships to focus on the flagship. We're ending this battle here." The Federation ships once again set their sights on the flagship, preparing for the final assault. Although the Krylon flagship had sustained heavy damage, it still loomed as a colossal threat before the human fleet. The latest assaults had torn through its armor, but the Krylons were using all their strength to avoid defeat. Tevian knew not to underestimate the enemy's power. The slightest mistake now could mean the end for the Federation. A tense silence prevailed on the command bridge. Marek, his hands sweaty, was focused on his terminal, tracking damage reports and analyzing the Krylon flagship's defensive maneuvers. Tevian, observing Marek's concentration, began to formulate a strategy in his mind. "Commander, the flagship is still active, but its shields are completely down," Marek reported, his voice trembling but hopeful. Tevian spoke sharply, without taking his eyes off the flagship. "Taking down the shields isn't enough. We need to completely destroy that ship. Otherwise, they'll regroup and launch a counterattack." As the human fleet advanced towards the flagship, the Krylons were making a last-ditch effort to resist. Energy bolts and massive lasers exploded across the stars. Tevian's only thought was to strike the final blow at the right moment. A wrong move now could turn the fate of the entire Federation over to the Krylons. "We need to make a final assault on the flagship. We must completely destroy it," Tevian said, turning to Marek. "Order all ships to focus their fire on the flagship." Marek immediately relayed the orders to the fleet. With their last ounce of strength, the human ships surged towards the Krylon flagship. But the enemy was still fighting back fiercely. The Krylons launched a final wave of attacks, raining heavy fire on the Federation vessels. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze in the dark of space. Then explosions once again shattered the silence of the void. The Krylon flagship was jolted by a massive energy blast. The human ships had unleashed a deadly assault, concentrating all their fire on this single target. "Commander, the flagship. It's collapsing," Marek shouted, his eyes shining with excitement. Tevian took a deep breath, keeping his eyes fixed on the massive silhouette of the flagship. "Just as we planned," he murmured, his voice a mix of victory and cautious restraint. The explosion of the Krylon flagship meant humanity had achieved its greatest victory in this war, but the shape of the galaxy's future remained uncertain. Moments later, the Krylon flagship began to break apart as if in slow motion. Debris scattered into space, and explosions shook the entire structure. Humanity was on the brink of eradicating its greatest enemy. Tevian felt a momentary relief, but the bittersweet taste of victory echoed in his mind. "The flagship is gone, Commander," Marek said, his voice now more subdued. He had come to understand that their work was done. The heart of the Krylon Empire had been ripped out. Tevian gave his final orders, breaking the silence on the bridge. "Tell all ships to retreat. Without the flagship, the Krylon forces cannot regroup. We have won this battle." The human fleet began to withdraw, burdened by the weight of their victory. Everyone aboard took a deep breath, but no one could fully relax. Tevian turned to Marek, his eyes still filled with concern. "This is only the beginning, Marek. The Krylons may have lost this war, but their dark shadow still lingers over the galaxy." Marek nodded. "Yes, Commander. But at least today, we triumphed." In the hours following the battle, the Federation ships began to recover. Losses were reported, and the retreating Krylon forces were put under surveillance. However, no one was in a celebratory mood. Even though humanity had emerged victorious, both sides had paid a heavy price. Tevian, looking at the terminal on the bridge, felt the fatigue of war weigh heavily on his shoulders. With the destruction of the Krylon flagship, the Federation began to mobilize to defeat the scattered Krylon warriors across the galaxy. Yet, no one knew that the real battle was just beginning. The Krylons may have lost their flagship, but their will to fight remained strong. The remainder of the Krylon fleet was starting to unite to undo the Federation's victory. Tevian's fleet had reached one of the most strategic regions in the galaxy, the Thora Belt. Here, a major conflict was imminent, as the last great forces of the Krylons were assembling. In the depths of interstellar space, a colossal battlefield was being prepared. Krylon ships, like wild predators, began encircling the Federation forces. "Track the signals," Tevian instructed his officers on the bridge. "The Krylons will make their final stand here. We must be prepared." As the human ships launched their assault, chaos erupted instantly. Krylon ships attacked like a storm, while the human fleet deployed all its defensive maneuvers. In the dark void of space, energy bolts and lasers collided like exploding stars. Tevian's gaze was fixed on the screen. The Krylon ships surged towards them like waves in the sea. Each one attacked from different directions, trying to tear apart the human fleet. However, Tevian had already figured out their strategy. Though the Krylon attacks were powerful, they were disorganized and hasty. Tevian's momentary, decisive action would be crucial to winning the battle. "Marek, issue commands to all ships. Pull back the left flank and launch an assault with the right flank," Tevian said, his voice sharp and resolute. The human ships briefly withdrew in accordance with Tevian's orders. This maneuver was intended to surprise the Krylons. As the Krylon ships pursued the retreating human forces in disarray, the right flank launched its attack, targeting a weak point in the Krylon fleet. Suddenly, massive explosions erupted in space. The Krylon ships were caught off guard by the human assault. The exploding ships created a grand light show in the darkness of space. With this strategic attack, the human fleet had started to dismantle the Krylon forces. Yet the Krylons still refused to surrender. Some of their larger ships advanced, aiming to strike at the heart of humanity. "Shields down to 30%, Commander,"
Marek shouted.
"At this rate, we won't be able to withstand the assault for long." Tevian kept his eyes locked on the advancing Krylon ships. He had to remain calm even as things deteriorated. Retreat was not an option. "Reinforce the shields. We're going on the offensive with the lead ships," he said. The fleet's largest warship, the Intrepid, surged towards the Krylon main forces. It was followed by smaller support ships. The Intrepid's massive laser cannons pierced through the Krylon armor, each hit causing explosions. Despite this deadly assault, the Krylons advanced fearlessly. Tevian's eyes were fixed on the Krylon command ship. Destroying this ship could break the enemy's morale completely. "Our ship will lead the charge. Redirect all power to the Krylon command ship," Tevian ordered, his determination resonating through the fleet. "It's time to end this war." As the Intrepid advanced towards the Krylon command ship with full power, a deadly battle unfolded between the two fleets. The Krylon ships attempted to encircle and slow down the Intrepid, but the human ships were systematically destroying the enemy vessels with coordinated attacks. Explosions echoed through the depths of space like thunder. When the Intrepid reached the command ship, the two massive vessels engaged in a deadly duel. Lasers and energy bolts struck their shields, creating enormous explosions. Tevian knew this final attack was critical. If the command ship was destroyed, the Krylon forces would collapse completely. "Activate the backup energy sources. We're launching a full assault," Tevian said, turning to Marek. The Intrepid directed all its weapons towards the Krylon command ship and fired a colossal energy blast. The explosion created a shock wave that reverberated through space. The Krylon command ship turned into a massive fireball. The explosion was so immense that surrounding Krylon ships were also thrown into disarray and destroyed. A moment of silence replaced the noise that had filled the battle. The Krylon command ship had been completely obliterated. Tevian took a deep breath. The end of this battle had finally come. The Krylon leader was gone, and their forces were scattered. Yet, the victory felt bittersweet. The memory of lives lost and ships destroyed was still vivid. Marek's eyes sparkled with the effect of victory. "Commander, the Krylon ships are retreating. We've won." Tevian gazed at the stars. This victory had been humanity's toughest struggle to maintain its presence in the galaxy. Yet, there was still much to be done. The war was over, but the steps required for peace in the galaxy were just beginning. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye. See you in the next story.